So you've probably heard this word awakening getting thrown around everywhere, right? But what does it actually mean? It's really not as mystical or out there as it might sound. It's actually a pretty profound shift in our experience, something that cultures and traditions all over the world have been pointing out for centuries. They just use different words for it.
Like in Buddhism, for instance, this big shift, they call it enlightenment. It's kind of the ultimate goal of their whole path.
Then you've got early Christianity, where they use the word metanoia. Now, we often hear this translated as repentance, but its literal meaning is way cooler. It means a deep, fundamental transformation of the mind, a total shift in how you see and even operate in the world. And of course, modern psychology has its own lingo for it. You might hear terms like deconditioning or ego dissolution. I know, ego dissolution sounds super intense, right? But all it really means is that sense of a separate, solid me starts to feel, well, less solid. It's not the center of the universe anymore.
And if you look at mystical traditions, you'll find the word gnosis. This isn't about believing something, it's about a direct experiential knowing. So, you see, we've got all these different names, but what's the common thread here? That's exactly what we're going to dive into. We're not here to pick one right path, but to really map out the underlying pattern that all these traditions seem to be pointing towards.
Okay, so before we jump into what awakening is, I think it's super important to talk about what it isn't. Because let's be real, there are a lot of myths and misconceptions floating around. Let's just clear the air and bust the biggest ones right now. Okay, myth number one. It's not about becoming some new, better person. It's actually more of a recognition. You start seeing through the persona, the you that you always thought you were. And you begin to realize that whole identity thing, it's not nearly as solid as you believed. And then there's the big one about emotions. This idea that you'll become this blissed out Zen master who never feels anger or fear again. Yeah, that's a total fantasy. You absolutely still feel everything. The real change is in your relationship to those feelings. They just don't hijack you and run the show anymore.
This is a really important one, too. We need to separate this from being woke in the political sense. You can be incredibly sharp at spotting propaganda and manipulation out there in the world, but be totally blind to your own internal patterns and automatic reactions. Seeing one doesn't automatically mean you see the other.
And this might be the biggest myth of all. The idea that awakening is some finish line you cross. Like you have one big aha moment, and boom, you're done. You've made it. For pretty much everyone, it just doesn't work that way. It's much more like a spiral, a process that comes in waves, stripping away deeper and deeper layers of your conditioning each time you circle back around.
So, okay, we've cleared the deck. It's not about becoming someone new, it's not about being emotionless, and it's definitely not a finish line. So what is it then? What's the real shift?
At its absolute core, awakening is a shift in perception. It's not about what you're seeing changing, it's about how you're seeing it. The best analogy I've ever heard is this. It's like you've been wearing a pair of glasses your entire life and you never knew they were there. Awakening is that moment you suddenly notice the glasses themselves. You see the lens you've been looking through all along.
And this is a perfect way to see that shift in action. On one side, you have unconscious identification. This is when you're completely merged with your experience. You think, I am angry. On the other side, you have conscious awareness. The thought becomes, I notice that anger is here. See the difference? I am my story becomes, I see the story I'm telling. It sounds so simple, but that little bit of space between you and the experience, it changes everything. You go from being the emotion to being the one who notices the emotion. And that leads to a really crucial point. This whole process feels less like you're learning new information and way more like you're unlearning a lifetime of stuff you didn't even know you'd learned. So, what kind of stuff gets unlearned? Well, it's usually the really deep, foundational beliefs we just take for granted, like the belief that your thoughts are facts, or the belief that your reactions are always justified, the belief that your identity, who you are, is this permanent, fixed thing. You start to see that, no, these aren't solid truths. They're more like constructions, stories we've built. And this unlearning really happens on two levels. You have an inner awakening, which is all about seeing your own conditioning, your internal patterns, beliefs, and reactions. And then there's an outer awakening, which is about seeing the external conditioning, things like propaganda, systemic manipulation, all that stuff. Now, what's interesting is that inner work often leads you to question the outer world.
But it doesn't always work the other way around. You can be an expert at spotting external lies and still be completely run by your own unconscious patterns. Okay, but this is where it gets, well, really frustrating for a lot of people. There's this gap, this lag time between seeing a pattern in yourself and actually being able to change it. You think, okay, I see it now. I see my defensiveness, so it should just stop. But it doesn't. And that can lock you into this really common and kind of maddening loop. And this loop is so common. Step 1, you notice the pattern. You become aware of, say, a defensive reaction you have. Step 2, in the heat of the moment, you react automatically anyway. The pattern just runs on autopilot. Then step 3, it's only after the fact that you go, oh, I did it again. You notice the reaction. That's the gap. And yeah, it can be infuriating to just keep repeating this. But here's the secret. The magic is in that noticing. The very act of observing it again and again and again is what's actually slowly weakening the pattern's grip.
And that brings us to maybe the most important takeaway in all of this. It's a point that completely reframes what the goal of this whole process even is. Here it is. Awakening isn't about reaching some final, perfect state of clarity. It's not a destination. It's about learning how to live with uncertainty. It's about learning to walk through the world without needing the ground under your feet to be solid all the time.
And remember what we said about it being a spiral? This is why. It happens in cycles. So when an old pattern or feeling comes back, you're not going backward. You're just spiraling inward, hitting a deeper layer of the same issue. First, you unlearn surface-level stuff. Then you get to the deeper conditioning. And eventually, you might even start unlearning your identification with the self altogether. So when you put it all together, the most useful question you can ask yourself isn't, am I awake yet? That just turns it into another goal, another destination to strive for. A much more powerful, more grounded, and more honest question is this: what am I unlearning right now? Because that question, that keeps you present, it keeps you curious, and it keeps you engaged in the actual process itself, which is where all the real transformation actually happens.